Hello all, welcome back.
Mr. Dev, hello.
Quite a few of you. Hey Gary, how are you doing? Hi Kaz. We got some of our usual suspects online, which is great. Let's just there are a couple more people joining, so let's just wait for those people to join. Wonderful. Great. Welcome to this session of Mentoring Professionals. I would like to start off by introducing Sarah straight away, and over to you, Sarah.
Great, lovely. Thanks, Dev. Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Watts. I am a transformational life and leadership coach. So my background, just so you get a bit of understanding about where I've come from, my background is in HR. Don't judge. So most of my HR career has been as a senior HR business partner. So I've done a lot of partnering with operational areas and also a lot of change programs. So some of the change programs that I've been involved in are changes around target operating model, operational transformation programs, systems implementation. My role is usually the role that is the kind of people, the voice of the people around change management and communications and how we're going to engage people and all of that kind of jazz. I have a really keen interest in personal development, and so over that period of time, my interest in personal development has taken me down a route of specialising in coaching. And in July this year, I announced my own coaching practice, which is called Joyful Minds. So I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to be able to do that. So how did I end up here? So one of my friends and colleagues have introduced me to Mentoring Professionals. So it's lovely to be here, and I really love the idea of people sharing their experience and their support of each other during this strange and wonderful time that we're in. And Dev was recently asking for some volunteers from the mentors to put on some of these webinars. And my immediate thought was to host a webinar around managing our emotions through change. Because let's face it, who hasn't been touched by change this year? Literally every single person on the planet, I think, has had some kind of change in one way or another. Whether that be losing a job, trying to hold on to a job, changing jobs. I mean, we all went through lockdown, kids homeschooling, you know, all of that. And with the best will in the world, you know, change, even if it's a change that we want, it can often be difficult. So what I'm going to share with you today are some tools and techniques that you can use to help manage your emotions through change. And the focus of the session is really around how you manage your own emotions. So I did notice in some of the registrations, there's a keen interest in helping other people manage their emotions. So whether you're a team leader or you're a project manager who's got stakeholders, the focus of the session is going to be about yourself. And what I would say is that in any relationship or situation, we have control over ourselves only. And also if we want to change the outcome, then ourselves is the best place to start. Having said all of that, if there is a real interest in doing something around stakeholder management and managing teams through change, we could look at setting up another session on that. So just drop Dev a message if that's something you'd be interested in having next time round. So a couple of things to mention. I'm going to talk for about 45 minutes. I would love it if we could have an interactive session. So I'd love it if you could get involved in the chat. I'm going to ask you a few questions as we go through, so please do get involved in that. We are recording the session, and you will get a copy of that recording and a copy of the slides afterwards. So don't worry about making notes. If you're someone who likes to make notes, you will get them afterwards. After I've done with talking, then there's the opportunity for questions and sharing. And then if you stick around right till the end, I have a competition to announce for all of you. So hang around until the end to hear about that. Okay, so I'm going to start with the first interactive question. Please drop into the comments where you're all joining us from. It'd be great to see where you're all from. We've got London down the road, Gary. London, Milton Keynes, Newcastle, Hampshire, Surrey, Buckinghamshire, London. Oh, we're a UK bunch so far. Lovely to see. Plymouth, Hampshire, Florida, Jacksonville. Amazing. Lovely to have you with us, Dan. Fantastic. Thank you. You've passed the first test of interaction. So we shall carry on with that aim. Okay, I'm going to share my screen now. Let's see. Okay, managing your emotions through change. Oh, something's not quite, oh, there we are. Wonderful. Okay, so before we get into the tools and techniques that you can use, I wanted to start by talking about the brain and how the brain works, because I feel that it's really helpful to set the scene around how our brains actually function, so that when we think about the tools to help ourselves, we're working in tandem with the way that the brain actually works naturally. So you may or may not have heard some of these things. I'll try and keep it in plain English as possible. So the first thing to talk about is that the brain actually prefers the unconscious mind. So the conscious mind can only actually cope with a very small amount of information at any one time. So if you were to think about this, if you had to consciously think about walking, breathing, talking, or any of those sorts of things, you literally wouldn't be able to function. And the same is true for thought patterns. So the brain actually pushes as much as it can, as much information, as much of that decision-making functionality into the unconscious mind. And so we're actually only consciously aware of a very small amount, where the unconscious mind is actually usually the one driving the bus, as they say. And there's a really good book, if you're into reading, that I would recommend if you're interested in this subject, called Thinking Fast and Slow. And I'll give you a tip, spoiler alert. The brain that is the quick one is the unconscious brain. And the brain that's the slow one is the conscious one. And so what can happen is that when these things are happening unconsciously, they can actually be much quicker. They did a brain study where they were scanning a brain, and based on the area of the brain that was lighting up, they were able to predict the answer somebody was going to give to a question. And so what that says is that, you know, we can reach a decision or a judgment about a situation before we've consciously really thought about it, which is very interesting. So, you know, if you imagine you've driven home on autopilot, probably we've all done that, not to be recommended, but it does happen. You've done something so many times, you've driven home that exact same route in that exact same car, and it's so automatic, you almost don't need to think about it. Well, that's the kind of analogy really for this, for what I'm talking about in terms of the unconscious mind. So what can happen then is that we start to create something called neural pathways. So the more that we have a thought pattern and we repeat that pattern of thought, we create and strengthen neural pathways. So these are the little connections that happen in our brain where the thoughts travel through. So I like to imagine an electricity cable where electricity runs down this cable. And the more and more electricity runs down this cable, the thicker and thicker that cable becomes. And actually the casing of the cable becomes thicker as well. And so those patterns of thoughts can happen very, very quickly. But there is good news in that we can create new ones. And I'll mention that in a moment. Another thing that's helpful for us to understand is that our brains are hardwired to look for negatives. So we have very old brains that haven't really changed a huge amount. And the function of the brain is really just to keep us safe. And it's not necessarily to keep us happy. And so the brain will be constantly scanning for danger. And this happens unconsciously. And the brain will be scanning for danger that's not just physical danger, but it's also psychological danger. So it might be, for example, that something happened to either ourselves or we've witnessed something happen to somebody else, and our brain will make a note of it and say, that's not safe, we're going to steer clear of that. So an example of that might be giving a presentation, it might be challenging the boss, it might be doing maths, it could be a whole number of different things. But our brain literally goes, oh, that doesn't look safe. I don't want to put myself in that position. And so a little mental note will be stored. And the brain will constantly be looking for risks and issues, which is designed all about keeping us safe. The next point to mention is that our brains like to make us right. So what happens when all of that information is passed through to the unconscious brain, there's some filtering that happens. And in that filtering, which is part of the brain's way of managing all that information, the filters that it will pass through will delete, distort, diminish, or generalize information. And the brain likes to make itself right by looking for information that basically gives evidence to the views that it holds. So I might have a view that it's not safe to have a motorcycle, let's say. And so my brain will naturally look for evidence to make that correct. Oh, I know this person had an accident. I might hear on the news that somebody was in a fatal accident. You know, I'll be listening for and taking note of information, and again, this happens very unconsciously. I'll be taking note of information that backs up the idea, the view, the belief that I have about motorcycles. Let me tell you another example of this. So in the company that I used to work for, there was this game that we played as part of our induction, and the game was called The Saboteur. And the trainer would say, right, I'm going to split you up into teams. You're going to be given a task, and you have to complete this task as quickly as you possibly can with a successful outcome. But there's a catch. And that catch was that one person in the team would be assigned the role of saboteur. And we wouldn't know who that person is. And that person was given the task of trying to throw the team off target from achieving their outcomes, but they couldn't be found out. So these were the rules that were set. And then we were each called up to the front and we were shown a piece of card no one else could see, and it said on it, saboteur or not saboteur. And then we were told, right, off you go, get on with your task. And so what would happen is we'd all be trying to figure this out. It was like a problem-solving task. And we were all trying to figure out what are we going to do and how are we going to fix this issue and all the rest of it. And then one person would come up with a suggestion which just seemed completely left field. It really wasn't helpful. It seemed to be steering the team off down a different route. And everyone would think, right, okay, so perhaps you're the saboteur. And as the task would go on, you know, maybe they'd say something else. And again, it kind of didn't really seem to gel with what the rest of the team were doing. And we think, right, no, maybe you are the saboteur, because that's the second time now that you've said something like that. Anyway, we'd reach the end of the game and the trainer would say, who is it you think is the saboteur? And we would all point at this person, all the team would point at this person and say, we think it's that person. And of course, this person would be like, no, it's not me. You know, I was just trying to help. And we'd be like, no, it was definitely you. Stop trying to throw us off. And then the trainer would announce that no one was assigned the role of saboteur. Everybody's card said, you're not the saboteur. And so the moral of that story is that if we see what we look for, so because we thought there was someone trying to throw off the game, we looked for evidence to make that true. And how often does this happen, particularly in the workplace, where we feel like maybe some people aren't in our corner, maybe there's a particular department or team or manager that is unhelpful, and we find evidence, don't we? Or we interpret things in such a way that really adds to the evidence of the belief that we formed. But in reality, that might not be the case at all. Okay, so the next one, our view of the world leads to our emotions, leads to our behavior, which leads to our results. So we're the only species on the planet that can think a thought and feel a feeling. We can think a happy thought and we can feel happy, and we can think a sad thought and we can feel sad. And what this is about is how our views of the world impact on how we feel. And based on how we feel will, change how we show up, what decisions we make, how people might experience us. And based on those behaviours will impact on our end result. So most of you probably will have come across, maybe in a leadership training or some sort of training at some point, a visual of an iceberg. And at the tip of the iceberg, which is above the water, is our behaviours. And what's underneath the water, and what you can't see, are all the thoughts, beliefs, values, our personality, our identities, our past experience. All of that is underneath the surface. And what the point of raising this is that if we want to try and make a change to our end result, or if we want to try and make a change to how we're showing up, or if we want to make a change to how we're feeling, then we've got to track all the way back to the start, which is our view of the world. And we need to start getting really curious about what's going on underneath that surface line. And that takes sometimes a bit of courage. It definitely takes curiosity and an open mind, but the results can really pay off. Okay, so the last thing to say here is that we can break our automatic patterns. So the analogy of the electricity cable, we now know through science and research that there's something called neuroplasticity, which is where we can start to create new neural pathways. And so we might have really ingrained patterns of thought. Maybe it's negative habits that we want to break. And it is possible to break down those neural pathways and to create new ones. And what we have to do that is we have to really set the intention to do it, and then we have to keep repeating it. So I like to think of an analogy here of an overgrown garden. So if you've got an overgrown garden, imagine the grass is right up to your shoulders. It's completely out of control, this grass in the garden, okay? Very thick, very difficult to walk through. And let's say in your garden, you always walk from your back door to your shed. And that's the route you always take. You don't go anywhere else in the garden. You just go to the back, from the back door to the shed. And because you've walked that path lots of times, the grass is downtrodden, it's flat. Maybe the path is wide, and it's quite easy for you to walk up and down that path. And so let's say you want to make a new path. You want to make a path from your back door to the back fence. To start with, it's going to feel difficult because all of that grass you've got to battle through. and it's the first time maybe you've done it, so it takes you a long time. And the first time is slow, but then the second time there's a little bit of a hint of where you've been before. So you go down that same route again, and you tread down that grass a little bit more each time. And the more and more you walk that new path, the flatter the grass becomes, the wider the path is, and the quicker it is to actually take that route. And then if you're not going to your shed, that grass is going to become overgrown again. So the same is true for our neural pathways. If we want to create new ones, it might feel difficult to start with. It might feel clunky, but the more that we do it and the more that we repeat those patterns, the stronger those neural pathways will become and the quicker and easier it will be. So our brains do like to, that they can be a bit lazy. It'll be the path of least resistance. And so the more that we create those new neural pathways, the more that will happen quicker and easier and more unconsciously. Okay. Let me just check in, see if anyone's got any questions at this stage. If you would like to drop any comments or questions into the chat before I move on to the next slide.
So there have been a few comments on chat, Sarah. I'm just trying to think, I'm trying to find one. So Paul says, I think the example of the saboteur occurs in the real world and not just in the workplace. It's the first time I've heard of it as a game / induction icebreaker. Yeah.
Good game for an induction, right? But yeah, absolutely. You're completely right. It happens in the real world because it's all about relationships, isn't it? And we show up with our views of the world. That person shows up with their views of the world, and they're not going to be the same. Yeah, great observation. Thank you. Any others, Dev?
Yes, and Gary, I think if you want to just unmute yourself and just you were talking about the analogy that Sarah was making. Or maybe not.
No, that's fine. I can do that. I can do that. So, Sarah, that was a very good example of how our beliefs influence how we feel, and vice versa. So, you know, the concept of the saboteur is all in one's mind, and yet everybody's looking for it. And we do that. We do that when we're in teams. We do that when we meet people for the first time. We have preconceptions, and they may not necessarily be right, but it's a great example.
Great, thank you, Gary. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Our views of the world, our beliefs about ourselves, our beliefs about other people, all of that is below the surface on that iceberg, isn't it? And we're bringing all of that, and our filters, the information that's coming through, will be filtered through those values and beliefs, and will shape our view of the world. So you're absolutely right. Yeah, thank you.
Slightly on the side, Sarah, Saboteur is actually a real game. There is a game called Saboteur. And you can actually buy it. It's all based around mining and dwarves mining, and they have saboteur dwarves as well. So it's a very interesting game which you can play with groups of up to 12 people.
Family fun then, Dev.
Definitely.
Fantastic. I'll have to look for that one for Christmas.
It's a great game, whether you're an adult or a child.
Yeah, fantastic. Great, thank you. Okay, so now we're going to get into the tools and the techniques. Now, what I would like to just share with you around this is that these tools and techniques, they're not designed in a way to kind of invalidate what your experience is of the world. Okay, so your view of the world, your feelings about the world are all going to feel true to you. What I'm going to share with you is some tools where you can start to just maybe shift those views in a more helpful way. So, you know, maybe the patterns that you have at the moment aren't serving you, they're not giving you the results that you would like, maybe then you're not experiencing the emotions that you would like to experience in life and you'd like to make a change. So this is all around how can we just shift things in a more enabling direction so that you're showing up with a more enabling mindset and getting those outcomes that you're looking for. Okay, so the first one is notice and allow. This is all about being where we are. Okay, so when we're in the middle of change, or you know, maybe we're just particularly having a difficult time, whatever that might be, the first thing is really just to notice and allow and be where you are. And I know that this can feel really uncomfortable, and it's our natural tendency to try and push away negative thoughts or feelings which are unwanted. But have you ever heard the saying, what we resist persists? And basically, when we try to resist something, we give it more energy, we give it more weight. And so the point with this step is just to allow, just to notice what's going on and allow that to come, because everything is impermanent. You know, it might not feel like it at the time, but these feelings will pass. And so there's actually really, it's quite useful to dig into how am I actually feeling right now, and using that as a way to really get curious about what's going on for you, because that will help you then in some of those following steps. So, you know, there's some helpful questions that you can ask yourself, and I do have a slide with these questions on at the end, so don't worry about writing them down. But you can ask yourself the question, when I think about this situation, what am I feeling in my body? What sensations am I feeling? And when I feel those sensations in my body, what emotions am I experiencing? And when I experience those emotions, what is it I'm thinking about? And when I think about those thoughts, what action do I feel compelled to take? And when I take that action, what's the end result that I get? So I'll give you an example of this. Maybe there's someone who has been made redundant, okay? And all they're thinking about is this redundancy. When they think about redundancy, what they feel in their body is a knot in their stomach. And it's going to be different for everyone, right? There's no right or wrong here. It's just using the body to allow us to access our emotions a little bit easier. So when I feel that knot in my tummy, what emotion am I experiencing? Well, I'm experiencing anxiety, worry, feeling stressed out. Okay, so when I'm experiencing those emotions, what am I thinking about? Well, actually what I'm thinking is, I'm not going to find another job. I'm never going to find the kind of job that I want. And it's all gone wrong. Okay, so when I'm thinking those thoughts, what action do I tend to take? Well, I tend to lose my patience with the kids or with my husband or my wife. Okay, so when I take that action, what's the end result? Well, I end up feeling worse. I feel worse because now I've taken that home, into the home environment, and my significant other, who is my person who I look for support, you know, I've now caused an issue with them. Okay, so that's just an example of how that process would work. So I'd like you, if you would like to get involved, share into the chat. If there's someone in the middle of change, maybe this is yourself, or maybe it's someone that you've got in mind, what kind of feelings might they be experiencing in their body, or what kind of emotions might they be experiencing?
I don't know whether you can read those, Sarah.
Can you read them out for me? Yeah.
So we got frustration, tenseness, fear.
Yeah. Frustration and fear. Yeah.
Feeling lost, depression.
Yeah.
Feeling at a loss.
Yeah.
Sadness, anxious, anger,
Yeah.
optimism. That's a different one, Kaz.
Depends if you liked your job before. What might we be experiencing in our bodies?
So Nikki says the physical manifestations are sleeplessness, upset stomach, unable to eat, or comfort eating.
Yeah.
Tiredness, headaches from Liz. And Nikki then adds all comfort drinking.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Uh,
And some of that is can be a distraction technique. So it might be that when you say when I think and feel these things, what do I tend to do? Well, actually, I tend to eat more. I tend to drink more. Well, what's the end result of that? Does that really help? But the point of this step is just to get curious about what's really going on for you and to lean in a little bit into that rather than trying to resist it or ignore it. Get curious. What can you learn about yourself and your current situation by asking yourself those questions?
a few more. Laziness, lack of energy, unable to concentrate, daydreaming, not knowing what piece of work to do next, so doing nothing.
Yeah.
Being on a razor's edge from Gary. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, they can be quite unpleasant, can't they? Those thoughts and feelings and situations. And so the next few steps in this model can really help to try and make some shifts around those. Okay, so the next one then is physiology. So this is all around the relationship between our mind and our body. And we often think about how the mind can have an impact on the body. So we just talked about some of those, how we don't sleep very well, we have maybe stomach problems, maybe headaches, that kind of thing. Well, this kind of link between our mind and body actually goes the other way around too. So we can do things with our physical body that can actually change our mindset or our mental state. We've all have heard of how exercise is helpful. It's helpful for releasing cortisol. It's also helpful. There was a study that came out recently around how it helps memory function, particularly high intensity exercise. But there's also a couple of little other hacks that you can use. One is called the Superman pose, and it's called the Superman pose because they did some research, and so this is all scientifically proven. If you put your hands on your hips and you push your shoulders back and puff your chest out in the sort of pose of a superhero, your body actually releases certain hormones that can make you feel more confident. And they also found that the reverse was true. So if you were to slump in your chair, crossing your legs, crossing your arms, this can actually release cortisol in your body. And so something as simple as the way that you stand or sit can actually change how you feel and your mindset. We also know from research that if you smile, your brain releases happy hormones, even if you don't feel like smiling. Actually, I was watching something with my daughter on Brainchild. I don't know if anyone of you have seen it. I love it for kids. But they have this exercise where you have to put your hand in a bowl of ice cold water and they time how long people can cope with that for. And then they did the exact same experiment, but said you now have to smile. And when people smiled, they were able to withstand that ice cold water even longer. It's incredible, really, how that our brains and bodies are built. Also, deep breathing. You've probably heard of this. Take some deep breaths, and we all kind of go, "Yeah, great, thanks. That's really going to help me right now." But actually, there is the research that shows that when we take deep breaths, we activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is designed to calm the fight or flight response. So it actually starts to take some of that cortisol out of your body, and then signals are sent to the brain that says the danger has passed, and we can come down from red alert. So actually deep breathing is proven to help us to feel better. There's lots of other things as well. Meditation. There's been some brain scans in monks who meditate that you can actually change the physical makeup of your brain through meditation. But the point here is all about what works for you. So whether that's exercising, whether it's breathing meditation, whether it's yoga, it might be something like singing or dancing. You know, how often, you know, maybe when we've been out to a party or something, remember those days where we turn up and we're not really feeling it yet, and we just kind of want to sit down and watch other people. And then eventually we kind of get involved. How much better do we feel when we do? You know, and actually go, yeah, I really enjoyed that, you know. Why was I sat at the bar for the first half an hour or whatever? So the question here is, how can I move my body right now to help my mindset? So drop into the chat the ideas that you have on what you particularly might find helpful in terms of moving your body.
Okay, so we have dancing, yoga, definitely exercise,
Yeah.
fresh air,
Yeah.
dog walk.
Yes. Getting out in nature is another one, isn't it? There's something about the blue-green that also triggers off something in our brains, I heard. Yeah, so getting out in nature, absolutely.
Running, power posing, standing up straight.
Yes.
And Liz says some me time.
Yeah, me time. Absolutely. Whatever that is for you that's going to help. Some time out. Yeah, self-care is so important. And often we forget about self-care, don't we, until we really, really need it. But, you know, self-care, if we can build that into our week, can really help us, you know, just give us a bit of a buffer for when times do get tough. Because sometimes, you know, when things are tough, it's even hard to find the resources for that self-care.
And then a couple
Fantastic.
more.
I'm loving the interaction. Yeah, go on, Dev. Was there another one?
Yeah, a couple more. Humor, reading.
Yes. Laughing.
And Val says she practices martial arts.
Oh, fantastic. Brilliant.
And Paul says seeing new sights, not necessarily going out to see them, but perhaps looking at art.
Oh, yes. Lovely. Yeah. Yeah, fantastic. And it all shifts our mindset, doesn't it, when we do those things that we enjoy? So it's just trying to find opportunities to do that when we need it, and regularly as well.
And
Great.
a really good one here from Dee Buckney: avoid reading or watching the news.
Yes. Yeah, I guess that's a good one to point out, isn't it? Steer clear of things that are going to be unhelpful. Yeah. I think a lot of people, you know, also notice how unhelpful social media can be. I don't know if you've seen that Netflix documentary that's out at the moment. I forget what it's now. Is it The Social Experiment or something like that?
Yeah,
all around the impact of social media on our, and hacking our physiology.
And we were talking about this earlier, Sarah, spending time with friends when it's not illegal, according to Nikki.
Yes. Yeah. Connection, human connection, so important. So important. We were just talking about that, Dev, weren't we, before we started? You know, working from home, absolutely fantastic, you know, to have flexibility, and, you know, we're not traveling so much, but, you know, there is something around human connection and human interaction in person. So absolutely, so important. Yeah.
There were a few questions from your last slide, but I think what we'll do is we'll pick them up at the end of your.
Pick the questions up at the end. Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Dev. Okay, wonderful. Right, so the next one then is focus. So remember that we see what we look for. So an example here is, we've all done it, haven't we, where we've bought a new car and suddenly we see this new car everywhere. The reality is that those cars were there all along. It's just now we're noticing them because it's important to us. So, you know, focus is one of those things where it's good to try and understand what is it we're actually focusing on right now. And I like to talk about, you know, we all know people who are glass half full people, and we know people who are glass half empty. Some people who will always find things that's wrong, and other people who will always find things to be happy about. And in reality, are their lives really that different? does the person whose glass, who is half empty, have things in their life that they could feel grateful for if they wanted to focus on that? And likewise, the person whose glass half full, do they have things that perhaps they could worry about or be concerned about if they chose to focus on that? And the reality is that really their lives aren't different. It's what they're choosing to focus on that's making the difference. So again, this is about us getting curious and saying to ourselves, what is it that I'm focusing on? And then a question that can just help to kind of, shift that a little bit is, what else might be going on? So let's say you've had a disagreement with somebody at work, and all you can focus on is this person just seems to be, making life difficult and being very, argumentative or unhelpful in meetings or whatever it might be. When you ask yourself the question, what else might be going on? It starts to open up the possibilities, doesn't it? Because what else might be going on? Well, actually, they're under a fair amount of stress. They've got a lot of change. They've had people leaving, starting. They've got this project or whatever it might be. When we ask ourselves the question, what else might be going on? It just allows us to widen that focus away from the area that perhaps we were honing in on, to the fact that there might be other possibilities going on there. One of the things I'd like to share with you about this is something that I found personally really helpful for me, and that is a gratitude meditation. I know it might seem a bit cliche, and if it's for you, great. If it's not for you, then you can discount it. But what I have done for the last year and a half, I would say, is a daily gratitude meditation, and it literally takes me 5 or 10 minutes every morning in the shower, where I focus on things that have either happened or elements in my life that I feel grateful for. And the trick is to really step into those moments and experience those moments. If any of you are interested, you can have a look on YouTube. You can find lots of examples of this. And what I have realized is that I've set up this new neural pathway now around gratitude, because I've repeated that behavior every day. And for me now, I see more things to feel grateful for. And when moments happen, in the moment, I feel great gratitude as well. There's this famous researcher, you've probably all heard of her, Brené Brown. If you've not heard of her, I would really recommend that you look her up. She's done YouTube videos. She's also got a documentary on Netflix. And she's a researcher, and she researches things all around how humans behave, right? But her speciality is around shame and vulnerability and this kind of thing. And she was trying to find what the secret ingredient was for people who experience the most joy in their life. And what she does is she interviews people, she takes lots and lots of information, like qualitative information, and then they look for patterns in what people have said. So it's very labor intensive, but very, very accurate. And what she was wondering about was, she thought that the common denominator here for the people who felt the most joy was faith. That's what she thought it was originally. And but it didn't quite fit, so she had to dig in a bit more. And what she found was the people who experienced the most joy in their life were people who practice gratitude. And she's got this famous quote that says, it's not joy that makes us grateful, it's gratitude that makes us joyful. So you have to find what works for you. This is just one example. If it's helpful, that's great. But the key point here is trying to understand, what am I focusing on? Is that serving me? And what else might be true? So drop into the chat. If you are in the middle of change, maybe this is what you're currently focusing on, or maybe it's someone, a hypothetical person in the middle of change. What might they be focusing on? Drop your comments into the chat box.
So a quick question from Paul saying, just want to check, is forming new habits a form of neuroplasticity?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. And I think in response to your question, Gary says, what's different?
What's different? What, in relation to doing the gratitude?
Sarah, you asked a question about when you're going through the gratitude and you're having change, what feelings are you having, or what are you looking for? And I said, well, one of the things I sometimes look for is what's different to the status quo when I'm going through change.
Right, okay. Yeah. So your focus is on what's different. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. We can focus on, I suppose, what's different that we like and what's different that we don't like. And we can have two different experiences, can't we? Or emotions as a result of that. So it's helpful to get curious about what is it I'm focusing on and how is that making me feel?
Okay. And another one is focus on new possibilities.
Yeah.
And then grateful that I don't currently have a mortgage.
Yes, great.
Dee Buckney says, I was furloughed and was struggling with everything and then started focusing on what I could control and my mood motivation improved massively.
Yes. Yeah. That one is a really key one. I'm going to talk a bit more on that in a while.
And Nikki says that she got invited to a Deepak Chopra Abundance Challenge meditation earlier this year, and I think that has really helped me. It's similar to gratitude. I'm seeing abundance and being grateful for it.
Amazing, fantastic, really helpful. That, yeah, I did see that circulating around lockdown, the 21-day challenge. Fantastic, well done.
And then Gary says focusing on what's important to me, and Kaz says having time to pursue new studies and interests.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, and some really great positive examples there of what we can focus on that can really help us to feel better. Were there any more, Dev?
Just the one more that's just come in, which is from Val saying having time for others.
Having time for others.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if we take the example of the lockdown and COVID-19, there's plenty of things that we can focus on that might not, might not bring about a kind of nice feeling. So we could focus on, all of those unwanted changes that we've had, or we can focus on some of the things that have happened that have been positive. The fact that neighbours are more connected to each other, the fact that we've realised that we are, all part of one global, planet, and we can't operate by ourselves. The fact that people are taking care of each other and asking how each other are and making the effort to make those connections where perhaps we wouldn't have, and all those other reasons that you've all shared. And that's the power that focus can have. Wonderful, thank you. I'm loving the interaction. Okay, the next one then is around meaning. Now this one is quite a big area. So this is all around the language that we're using with ourselves and with others, and the story that we're telling ourselves and the story we're telling others. So for example, if you were to talk about a change where you were to say that you were absolutely devastated, and you were to talk about a change where you felt disappointed, would you feel differently using two different words? Well, the research shows that actually we would feel differently about it. There was some a research done by the Crown Prosecution Service into police who were interviewing eyewitnesses of car accidents. And they would ask these eyewitnesses, so people who'd actually seen this accident happen, they would ask them to estimate what speed they thought the car was travelling at the time of the accident. And with one group of people, they would ask them what's the speed before the car crashed. And with another group of people, they asked them what speed did they think the car was travelling at before they had a bump. And what they found was that they got two very different sets of answers just based on that change in wording. So our emotions can be attached to the meaning that we place about something. And there's a famous quote by Eckhart Tolle, which is, the primary cause for unhappiness is never the situation, but your thoughts about it. So this kind of harps back a little bit to the notice and allow, allowing things to be as they are, but we naturally attach a meaning to something. So what does this situation tell me about me? What does that mean about me? So it might be, I've lost my job. What does that mean about me? I'm not good enough at my job. Or it might be, you know, I've got ill. What does that mean about me? I'm not taking care of myself. Everyone else takes care of themselves, but I don't. And that's something that I then feel ashamed about. So the point is that it's not the situation, it's the meaning that we attach to that situation that affects how we feel about it. So if we were to get really curious and remember some of the questions from the first step, what am I feeling? What am I thinking? There's questions here about, what do I believe to be true about this situation? And remember, our brains make us right. Our brains look for evidence to back up the views that we have. So if we have a certain view about that situation, we're only really going to be noticing the evidence that backs that up. So the questions to ask ourselves here is, what do I believe to be true about this situation? What evidence do I have about that? What other beliefs will be helpful in this situation? And how would things change if I believed those instead? So the key here is not to make a massive leap from my situation is awful to my situation is amazing. You know, it might be that the first step is my situation's not as awful. Or it could be there's an opportunity for my situation to change. So we're not looking to make that massive, great big leap, but what we're trying to do is just shake that up a little bit and say, is there something else that I could, you know, realistically believe instead that will make a difference to how I feel about that situation? Can I recognize that perhaps my view on this isn't 100% the entirety of that situation? There's just a chink of something different that perhaps I could believe that would help me to feel differently and show up differently. So let's share in the chat what beliefs, and this is really where our negative self-talk can come in. If you are in the middle of change, or someone you know is in the middle of change, what kind of limiting beliefs might we hold about that change?
It's too extreme.
Mm.
One response from Gary.
Yeah.
I mean, similar to that would be, it's too hard.
Yeah.
Not for me, or something like that.
Yeah. So if we took that belief that it's too hard, it's too extreme, what belief could we swap that out with that might just move us just a little bit further in a more enabling direction?
Gary says it'll be a challenge.
Yeah.
Going back to your original question, a couple more. I can't see how to change it, or limiting my belief.
Yeah.
Just on the point of limiting beliefs, Nikki says, limiting beliefs often come from others, teachers, parents, siblings. You'll never be any good at maths if you don't have a decent job. You're not worthy of blah, blah, blah.
Our limiting beliefs can come from others. You know, we do tend to form some of those beliefs in very early childhood. So our significant others around that time will, you know, shape some of those beliefs. So our beliefs can sometimes come from others, and our beliefs can also be formed by ourselves about our experiences of the world. And the ones that are formed by us are generally, back to what I said earlier about the brain and how it's trying to keep you safe. So generally, the beliefs that we formed ourselves will be, at some point, will have been to have kept us safe. And the point here is that maybe those beliefs were helpful at that moment in time, but holding on to them forever and a day, you know, actually starts to become unhelpful. So if I have a view that I don't like presentations, or I don't like maths, or I don't like speaking up in meetings because it's not safe, you know, or whatever the views might be, you know, at one point those were formed perhaps because they were that our brains were trying to keep us safe. But is that helpful any longer? Is that helpful when I'm trying to, you know, raise my profile, or do more networking, or go for that promotion, or change jobs, change careers? You know, how helpful are those beliefs? Are they really serving us now? And that's when we want to start to challenge them and say, you know, do we really believe that to be true? And what could I believe instead? You know, the word yet is wonderful. You know, I haven't learned how to do that yet. You know, it can be really powerful. So instead of saying I can't do that, you can just add the word yet. I can't do that yet. And how differently do we feel? So you may have all heard about the fixed versus the growth mindset. A fixed mindset basically says you're born with an innate ability. So maybe you believe that leaders are born, or salespeople are born, right? You're fixed. You have your set of skills, and that's you. And then there are other people who believe that we have a growth mindset, which is we can learn skills. We can learn how to be a leader. We can learn how to be an effective salesperson. We can learn the people skills that we need to succeed. And I know which one feels better for me, right? So there's something about, what do I choose to believe here that's actually going to help me to show up in a more enabling way? Okay, any others, Dev?
Yes. So Amit Pal was saying, if somebody else can do it, I can do it.
Yes.
Or with the right mindset, everything is achievable.
Yeah.
And Kaz says something which I didn't quite understand. Kaz, perhaps expand on that. I'm up against a much larger number of applicants than I would normally be. Perhaps you can explain that a bit more, Kaz?
It was just the so normally you'd expect to be up against, say, perhaps half a dozen other people applying for new jobs. Now with so many people in the same boat, you're up against that many more, and it's like, well, are my qualifications, are my skills and experience enough to you know, hold me in good stead against those others?
Yeah, that's one that I imagine a lot of people are experiencing right now. And so if we were to apply this tool, this technique, to that belief, what might be believable? Because let's face it, it's got to be believable. There's no point in telling us that night is day. But if we were to shift that in a direction that's more enabling and more helpful, what could we believe instead?
So Gary said something a bit earlier, which is about breaking it down into smaller manageable pieces. So rather than doing it in one go, breaking it down into steps.
Yeah.
Paul says, perhaps it's not as bad as I think, therefore what can I do about it, and what things can I try?
Yeah.
Nikki says, I don't know if I don't try.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. There could be, you know, there could be a couple of other enabling beliefs, particularly around that applying for a job one, which is I'm going to get experience from the recruitment process. It could be, you know, I am where I am in my career and in my own journey, and there are always going to be people with more experience, and there's always going to be people with less experience, you know, but no one else, I know it's a bit of a cliche, no one else is me. You know, I know that can sometimes be a little bit cliche and a bit twee, but it's just trying to kind of, what could I do that takes me just that one step closer to a more enabling belief that helps me to feel better and I'm going to show up better? Because if we go to an interview thinking, oh, they've got a gazillion other people and they're all going to be better than me, are we really putting our best foot forward? And I know we don't do this consciously, and we're not necessarily choosing that, but inevitably, if we've got those thoughts going around in our head, we're not going to show up our best selves. So what's a more helpful belief, a more enabling belief that we can have going into that situation that just means we're going to show up in a more empowering way? Any more, Dev?
Sorry, I was on mute.
Famous last words.
Indeed. So I'm good at what I do, and they don't know what they're missing out on, from Liz.
Great, love it.
And Paul says, my skills are enough, but there aren't any job opportunities where I have just tried. Why don't I try somewhere else?
Yeah. Another more enabling belief might be this is what's happening to everyone, and it's not a reflection of my skills and ability. It's just trying to find what might be helpful for you.
So,
Okay.
Nothing else.
Okay. All right. So we'll do the last one then, which is take action. So if you remember what I was saying, that how we think affects how we feel affects how we behave, and how we behave impacts on our outcome. So, and somebody, I forget who it was, mentioned about, identifying what can I have control over. Oftentimes, and particularly during change, we can feel very done to. We didn't choose this. We wouldn't have done it this way. We didn't want this to happen. Those people, whoever those people are, this change has come from them. It's up, they've been the one that has made this change to me. And we can get very caught up in being in effect. So what's the change? What's the impact that that's had on me? And we can get stuck there. And this point here is all about trying to get back to cause. So rather than being in done to, thinking about what do I have control of? So given that the circumstances are as they are, what choice do I have? What could I have control over? What choices would I make? So again, if you want to do some extra reading or delving into this, the circle of influence is one you could have a look up, Google that. So this is all about how do I start to take control back for the areas that I can control. So the questions to ask ourselves around this is, what would I like to have happen? So given the circumstances, what would I like to have happen now? And what one step could I take that moves me towards that goal? So this is really about how do I start to take control and start to do things that are helpful for me in this current situation that I've chosen to do. So in the chat, maybe drop in your thoughts that if you're in the middle of change, or you know someone who is, what little things could they do? What first steps could they take to take control of their situation?
So you just want to repeat the question?
Yes. So if you're in the middle of change, or you can either answer from yourself's perspective or from a hypothetical perspective, what steps could you take that would help you move in the right direction? So the right direction in terms of what you want as an outcome to this situation.
So a couple of responses. Take one step at a time.
Yeah.
Break it down into bite sizes.
Yes.
Define the outcome I want.
Yeah.
That's about it at the moment.
Yeah. All great suggestions. Yeah, go on, sorry, Dev.
If the audience would like to just unmute themselves and say some of these things out loud, that's perfectly fine as well. Amrit Paul says, connecting with the right people.
Yes, networking. Yeah. So, I mean, great guys. Yeah, absolutely. Get clear on what you want and then start taking steps down that route. Does anyone have anything else they want to add?
Nothing at the moment.
No.
Oh, there's one more,
Okay.
sorry. One more that's just come in.
Yeah.
Identify who can help you. Might just be a friend or someone to run your thoughts by.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great one. And haven't we all seen, LinkedIn, hasn't LinkedIn changed this year, from being quite cold and businesslike, and now it's a lot more supportive as a community, and people are helping each other, and people are getting jobs, through recommendations from people they've met on LinkedIn. I think that's wonderful. Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. So, in summary, this is all about getting curious about what's going on below the surface and just starting to try and make some shifts and changes in the right direction so that we can shift our mindset and our physiology to being a more helpful. So this isn't about good or bad, this is about what's helpful for you, so that you can show up in the way that you want to show up and get the results that you want to get. So before we go on to questions, I do just want to also, I have one more slide, and that is, I just want to have a nod to, if, you kind of have to have a level of resourcefulness in yourself in order to do some of those techniques that I've spoken about. And I just want to recognize that, for some people this year, maybe that change has been too overwhelming for those steps. Maybe that self-care has been too much even to do the self-care activities. So I didn't feel like I could do a webinar about managing change and our emotions in change without just talking a bit about mental health. So mental health is exactly the same as physical health. We can be well at times and we can be unwell at other times. And it's not a black and white, switch on, switch off, it's a spectrum. The same is true for mental health. And I think that over the last few years, mental health has become, a lot more acceptable to talk about, but there's still a lot of stigma attached to it. I think that people could get concerned about saying that they're struggling because they think that somebody might make a judgment about them, about whether or not they're able to cope, whether or not they're good at their job. It might be a number of different things. And so all I want to say at this point really is that if you or someone is at that point of overwhelm, the best possible thing you could do is actually talk to someone. We need to take care of ourselves and we need to take care of each other. So there's lots of different ways that you can do it. For most people, reaching out, the first step is a GP. There's also some helplines that I've put up here. These are UK ones, so if anyone's watching from another country, I'm sure if you were to Google what support lines are available, you would find some. We have the Samaritans. There's also a text helpline called Shout, so you could just text if you don't feel like you could speak to someone. There's also Mind. Mind have lots of wellbeing drop-in centres all over the country. And also don't forget your employee assistance program. So if you're lucky enough to work for a company who has an employee assistance program, you can also access support through them. Okay, so that's it for my slides. We do have the announcement about the competition, but before I talk about that, let's just hear any questions that people have. And I'd also like to hear what your key takeaways were from what I've shared. And it'd be great if I could see some faces. So I invite you to come into the space with your videos. Oh, there you all are.
This would be a great time for everyone to open your videos so we can have the obligatory wave that we all seem to go for at these sessions. So if you really want to, then just turn on your videos and give us a nice big wave.
Yes, nice to see you all.
I said that I should turn on mine, shouldn't I?
Yes, there you are, Dev.
Great. So just a couple of people who said things. And if you want to say something yourselves, please do say so. Liz, you've got a great mantra. Do you want to tell us what it is?
Yeah, so through this time with my team and also with my seniors, I've always said it's okay not to be okay, and not forget that. And actually, it's good to talk. And often I've started a conversation with someone rather than actually going into the meeting. I've literally just started it with, how are you today? And the reaction I've got from some people is absolutely amazing. And it kind of lifts your spirits as well and makes you feel positive. And I think that to me is really, really key and helped me an awful lot.
That's
Definitely.
wonderful. That's lovely for you to share that, Liz. I think we can have such a big impact, can't we, by just genuinely checking in with somebody about how they're feeling. And then the flip is true as well. If someone says to you, how are you doing? Don't just go with our stock up, yeah, I'm fine. You know, because we all do that, don't we? Yeah, I'm fine, when we're really not. You know, so someone genuinely asks and genuinely interested, then share, you know, how you're doing.
My normal reaction when people actually say, yeah, I'm fine, I'm going, okay, do you really want to tell me how you're feeling now?
Yes.
Nice.
Let's try that again. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and also modeling that behavior, because the more we demonstrate it ourselves, the more that we make it okay for other people to be honest. So yeah, fantastic share. Thank you, Liz.
It's when you get the people that say, you know, oh, how are you? But you can tell they don't actually want you to answer that. They're just, oh, I'm ticking a box. I've asked the question today. How are you? There we go. I've done my bit for the corporate thing.
Yeah, it's funny how we can actually sense that, isn't it? They may as well just say hi. Don't bother asking the question because you're not really listening to the answer. We can feel it energetically, can't we? Yeah. Yeah. So let's be more of the other people.
Sorry to interrupt. I was just looking at some of the earlier questions that we didn't quite get to, and I think Amritpal, you asked one about the imposter syndrome. Would you like to say something about it?
Sorry, my son is with me. So I just want to know, like, what more about imposter syndrome. Like, how does it make you feel bad, like imperfect or not able to do things? I think, but it is covered almost in the session.
Yeah, imposter syndrome is something which has become, I guess, awareness of it has become greater over the last few years. And the way it's described is that there's a difference between what other people see in us and how we feel in ourselves. So, you know, we might, I mean, look, we've all been here, right? We've applied for a job. They've given us the job. They've given us the job because they've checked our skills and experience. They've met us. They've asked questions of us. Our questions were deemed more than acceptable enough for us to get that job. But we get that job and we think, oh, when they find out that I can't do what I've said I can do, they're going to sack me, right? That's what we think. They're going to find us out at some point. So there's a disconnect between what's happening on the outside and what's happening on the inside. And quite often what's happening on the inside is some of those limiting beliefs that I mentioned that we have about ourselves. Because, you know, and we also look for the evidence to make ourselves right. So we tend to discount any evidence. Oh, but didn't you do that project really well? And didn't you get that amazing qualification? And oh, didn't you get this special mention, you know, in those employee awards? And it'd be like, yeah. I'm discounting that because that doesn't fit with my view about myself. You know, also perfectionism can come in with this. You know, when we achieve something we've set out to achieve, we just raise the bar. So instead of feeling good that we've achieved that, we just go, well, obviously that was too easy. You know, I'm going to raise the bar instead. So the key with imposter syndrome is to start digging into, what do I believe about myself? What is it I'm focusing on? What do I believe to be true? You know, what evidence have I got that maybe supports a different view, and just chip away a bit at some of those things. Yeah, thanks for asking that question.
May I please ask another question?
Of course.
Oh, thank you. At the very beginning, you mentioned something about the brain focusing on the negative type of thing, and therefore seeing evidence to comfort that. How can one kind of harness that, either like, you know, on a personal perspective, but also to work with clients and teams, because everyone sees, kind of has the same kind of perspective from the fact that everything is negative and actually it is not. But I don't know how to help people see the end another way.
Do you mean, how do you harness the looking at the negatives, or how do you switch it around into the positives?
To switch it.
Switch it, yeah. So personally for me, the gratitude meditation has really helped in that regard. So rather than always, you know, and this is where the thought pattern can happen so unconsciously and so quickly that we can naturally just think about the negatives. You know, when we start to pay attention to things that we appreciate, it kind of, the momentum of that builds. It's a natural human condition. But I would say, you know, some of that gratitude stuff really helps us to shift. And also when we're in gratitude, when we're experiencing the feeling of gratitude, we're not feeling fear or anxiety or any of those other types of emotions. The two can't exist at the same time. So I think there is something around mindfulness, about self-awareness, catching yourself when you know you're doing it, and using some of those techniques that we've spoken about today, just to kind of, come on, you know, it's not all bad. It's not all like that. You know, we tend to generalize everything, never, you know, it's always like that. You know, we generalize, and it's a natural human condition to do that. But if we use some of those techniques, we can just sort of chip away a bit at that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much.
No problem. Oh, Dev, you're on mute.
I know, I just noticed. So some people say they need to leave. So so Sarah, it might be good if you could share the competition now.
Yes. Okay, drum roll, everybody. Oops, there we go. Okay, so I have an exciting competition to announce to you all. So I would like to do a bit of a giveaway. I've got 5 prizes, if you like, where you can all enter into this competition for these prizes. The top prize is a free 3-month coaching program, which consists of 6 coaching sessions over the course of that 3 months. And then I've got 4 runner-up prizes of an 1.5-hour coaching session, all with me. And it can be on a topic of your choice. It can be something around your personal life, or it can be something around your professional life. It might be leadership if you want to do that. It can be anything, basically. So to apply, all you need to do is pop me an email with competition in the header. And you have until, I think we said Sunday at midnight to do this. Yeah. So pop me an email. I will gather all of those emails together, and we'll do a random Excel selection thing on Monday, and then we will announce the winners into Slack. So if you would like to find out a bit more information about me, you can check me out on the mentors page in Slack. There's also a link to my LinkedIn there, or you can have a look at my website, which is joyfulminds.co.uk. But I would love it for you all to enter if it's the right thing for you to do at this particular moment in time, and do share with any other mentoring professionals in our group.
And can I just say that we will be opening this competition to mentoring professional members as well. So one of the conditions of this competition is that you should be a member, but if you've joined the session, then you will be able to enter the competition anyway. So that's why we're keeping the end date till end of Sunday. And we're planning on announcing the winners on Monday, aren't we, Sarah?
Yes.
Right. And if you are the winner, you will be notified by email as well.
Fantastic.
Great.
Well, thank you all for joining, and thank you, Dev, for being my wingman with the questions.
You're
you
welcome.
thought you were
Thank
getting
you for
some
a great
time off.
presentation. I think the feedback has been fantastic and the interaction has been great. So Darren, just to answer, you just have to email Sarah Sarah, if you just want to post your email address again.
Yeah.
Alternatively, we will be posting the entry link on our Slack channel. And if you aren't members of Slack, I'm just pasting a link that I suggest you copy from chat to join our group, and you'll have access to another 30 odd mentors and all of the other work that we're doing at the moment as well. So on that note, Sarah, thank you so much. That was a fantastic session. And everyone, thank you for attending, and I hope you really enjoyed it.